Hello and welcome. This is Mission Control Houston. We're live from the International Space Station's Flight Control Room at NASA's Johnson Space Center. In just a few minutes, a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft is set to leave the space station after completing the first part of its mission. The main objective for the spacecraft was to deliver cargo to the people living aboard the International Space Station. With its mission nearly complete, the Dragon spacecraft is ready to return to Earth and make another delivery, returning some scientific experiments and hardware back to the researchers on the ground. We are talking about a cargo spacecraft today, so there are no people on board the Dragon spacecraft that's getting ready to depart the space station. You're getting live views on your screen now of Mission Control Houston. But going back to some earlier events, let's take it back to its launch day. This mission that we're talking about is SpaceX's 30th Commercial Resupply Services mission for NASA. It kicked off on Thursday, March 21st, with a launch from Launch Complex 40 at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida atop a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket at 4:55 p.m. Eastern Time. It carried more than 6,000 pounds of scientific research, food, supplies, and hardware on board. To give a little sampling of what was on board, the spacecraft launched some items like some exercise equipment, a water filter, acoustic blankets for their bedrooms, control some sound in there, and of course, plenty of science experiments. The Dragon spacecraft arrived at the space station on March 23rd, docking autonomously to the zenith port of the space station's Harmony module at 7:10 a.m. Eastern Time.
Houston Station on 2 for our pop.
TC, we copy that you guys aren't receiving our pop info right now. We're dealing with the payload issue, and it should come back shortly.
Excellent. Thank you.
So you just heard some chatter here in Mission Control between our Capcom, David Brenna. You see him there on the screen. Standing is our flight director, Ronak DeVay. So Tracy Dyson is going to be monitoring the operations for us from the space station's cupola. So she's been conversing with the ground. And we just let her know that we are in a brief but expected blackout period of communications, so she might not be seeing data, and they confirmed that that was okay and expected. So we're here in Mission Control. As you see on your screen, that's Flight Director Ronak DeVay. He's our lead flight director in Houston for today's undocking. He's overseeing teams of flight controllers here in Houston who are monitoring the spacecraft's departure from the space station.
Station Houston on Space Ground 2 for Cargo Dragon. In preparation for undock, perform Step 1 of 1.303, crew monitoring of ACS moding for Dragon departure. The undock sequence start time is still 17:05 GMT.
So here in control, Flight Director Ronak DeVay just consulted with his team about today's undocking procedures. He said that they are right on track for undocking at 12:10.
If you could repeat, I was taken too.
Yeah, sorry about that, TC. I didn't peek at my Node 3 WHD curve before I called. Hey, I was saying the call out for starting the sequence of Cargo Dragon calls, which was that in preparation for undock, perform Step 1 of 1.303, monitoring ACS moding for Dragon departure. The undock sequence start time is still 17:05.
Roger that. Dragon undocking preparation complete, and ISS crew is ready for departure.
TC, we copy. Also want to let you know that for cargo undock, RPOP is a nice to have and not required. And also, we no longer have KU right now, so if you could just report to us when you see that RPOP telemetry flowing, we'd appreciate it.
Roger. In Houston, right now we see good RPOP data.
Houston copy, it's good news.
So you just heard a conversation between Capcom David Brenna and NASA astronaut Tracy C. Dyson, who is aboard the International Space Station supporting today's operation. After a conversation with Flight Director Ronak Deve, they confirmed that they are on track to send the undock command to the Dragon vehicle at 12:05 p.m. Central Time. That would result in a physical separation, an official undocking time of 12:10 p.m. But they're continuing to look as you can tell, we don't have views of live views of the Dragon spacecraft right now, so they're evaluating. It's determined that it is okay if Mission Control is not able to see the actual undocking, but that really emphasizes the role of NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson. So she's monitoring today's undocking from the station's cupola. This is a room aboard the space station that has plenty of windows, a workstation with data screens, and a good view of the Dragon spacecraft. She's acting as a second set of eyes for Mission Control today. This space station may be in an orbital nighttime during the undocking, so we might not get the best views of the spacecraft here in Mission Control, and as we said, we might be in a loss of signal. But Dyson has a much better vantage point, and if needed, we'll be able to visually confirm that the spacecraft has separated from the International Space Station. After physical separation, she'll also monitor to make sure that the Dragon is behaving as it should while still near the space station. So in the unlikely event in a loss of control, the space station doesn't get damaged. But Mission Control Houston that you're seeing now is not the only flight control room in play today. So this Mission Control Houston also works closely with SpaceX, who is monitoring today's operation from their Mission Control Center in Hawthorne, California. We're in what's called joint operations as both control rooms work together. After the spacecraft is no longer in the vicinity of the space station, the SpaceX team will take the reins and monitor Dragon through its splashdown back on planet Earth.
Station Houston on Space Ground 2. Dragon is go for undocking and departure.
Station copies.
Speaking of these joint operations, one of the steps in the timeline is to go through a go, no-go poll between the two control rooms to make sure that not only is the International Space Station ready for departure, but the Dragon vehicle itself as well. And as our Capcom just told Tracy Dyson, we are go for undock. With a departure today, the Dragon spacecraft is expected to splash down on April 30th off the coast of Florida. This is expected to occur after midnight Central or closer to 1 a.m. Eastern Time on April 30th. Mission managers have been keeping a close watch on weather over the weekend. The weather did not cooperate earlier in the weekend, but it was decided that weather is within acceptable limits on Tuesday, April 30th, meaning that weather-wise, we can undock today. We will not be live on air for Splashdown, but you can keep up with the spacecraft status on social media and on the space station blog. But of course, a go for weather is not the only check mark that we needed today here in Mission Control. They have pulled go, confirming that the International Space Station ready and that the Dragon spacecraft is in good working order. So we got a go, and Capcom just let NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson know. The International Space Station has a busy schedule of events coming up with today's undocking, starting with today's undocking. The cargo spacecraft has spent just over a month at the space station, a little over 35 days, and its undocking is the first of 2 mandatory vehicle maneuvers to make way for NASA's Boeing Crew flight test mission. So next up after the undocking today, the crew will do a port relocation of their Crew Dragon vehicle on Thursday, May 2nd. They'll undock from the forward space-facing port of the Harmony module and dock again at Harmony's Zenith port. This is the port that we're watching today where the Cargo Dragon is departing from. Then NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams are scheduled to launch on May 6th, becoming the first ever humans to travel aboard the Starliner spacecraft. So let's go over some of the events that are coming up next. SpaceX will send the command to begin the undock sequence. This is in less than 10 minutes from now. SpaceX will send the command to undock, and then the umbilicals will retract, and 2 sets of latches will open. There are 12 in total in 2 groups of 6. We'll get confirmation of that milestone from our VVO, or our Visiting Vehicle Officer. The spacecraft, also known as a cargo vehicle, paid a visit to the space station and is now leaving, hence the name Visiting Vehicle Officer. It's one of the positions here in Mission Control monitoring today's undocking, one of many. And when the latches are open and the spacecraft is no longer attached to the space station, the spacecraft will perform 2 undocking burns and 2 departure burns. These are small firings of the spacecraft's engines to back away from its docking port and begin to move out of the neighborhood of the space station. And of course, NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson will be monitoring the departure. And there's the VVO there on your screen. We're still on track for an undocking at 12:10 p.m. Central Time. So while we wait for that undock command to be sent, we've talked a lot about NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson. Of course, she's key to today's operation, but she's also joined by her crewmates aboard the International Space Station. So let me take this from left to right on your screen. So we've got Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Grabankin, and then to his right in the top row, we've got Tracy Dyson, who of course is monitoring today's operation. Lower row, the next one over on the right, that is NASA astronaut Mike Barrett of Washington State. Moving on up above, behind him, to the right is Roscosmos cosmonaut Nikolai Chub. Moving on down the line, we've got NASA astronaut Matt Dominic of Colorado, and then Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Kononenko, and finally we've got NASA astronaut Jeanette Epps of Syracuse, New York. This week, the crew got the spacecraft ready for its departure, performing a number of closeout procedures. If you'd like a behind-the-scenes look at what that looked like, NASA astronaut Matt Dominic recorded a tour of the Dragon spacecraft and included a time-lapse of how he packed the cargo in before closing it up. He noted that there are small refrigerators inside the spacecraft that will keep some scientific samples fresh for a splashdown on April 30th. These polars, as they're called, are located right by Dragon's door, so it can be one of the first things removed when Dragon is back on Earth. Less than 3 minutes now until the undock command is sent, which of course sets off a series of events leading to an undocking at 12:10 p.m. Central Time, 1:10 p.m. Eastern. So coming up here soon, the Mission Control Center at SpaceX will send that undocking command. After that, almost immediately, umbilicals will retract. These supply power to the Dragon spacecraft. So when they're attached, the spacecraft is on internal battery power. Then 2 sets of 6 latches will be released. The spacecraft will perform 2 undocking burns, the first occurring very shortly after all of the latches are opened. These are short burns, just 1 second and 5 seconds back to back. At this point, we'll see physical separation of the spacecraft, marking the official time of undocking. Dragon will slowly move away from the space station. We might not be able to see it on our screen, but hopefully we'll get our views sometime shortly after that. Just seconds after physical separation, the spacecraft will perform a series of 2 departure burns. These are relatively quick as well, both less than 30 seconds each, and this will bring the cargo Dragon even farther away from the space station, outside the neighborhood of the space station. We have 2 physical boundaries around the space station. You can't see them. Nothing is physically there to mark them. It's like the property line of your house. The first is called the keep out sphere, and farther out we have the approach ellipsoid, or the neighborhood of the space station. There's a good visual representation on your screen there. These are safety boundaries used in the unlikely event that something goes wrong with the Dragon spacecraft after it undocks. We're about a minute away now from SpaceX sending that undocking command. Our live coverage will end as the spacecraft moves out of the approach ellipsoid, and joint operations between Houston and Hawthorne, who you see there, their control room, that will end. Mission Control Houston will turn its focus fully to the International Space Station, and SpaceX continues to monitor Dragon on its journey. It will go on to complete some additional burns to fine-tune its path to the splashdown site and make its ocean landing on April 30th at about 1 a.m. Eastern Time. The umbilicals have been demated, and the spacecraft is on internal battery power. The first set of 6 latches is opening now. So the undocking command was sent by SpaceX in Hawthorne, California, kicking off a series of events leading us to an undocking at 12:10 p.m. Central, 1:10 p.m. Eastern. The umbilicals are retracted, and the first set of 6 latches is opening. There are 2 sets total for a total of 12 latches. The first couple of steps in this undocking sequence are proceeding nominally. The first set of hooks are open.
Station Houston on 2. First set of hooks open. Dragon is committed to undock.
Mission copies.
As you just heard, that first grouping of latches is open and we are committed to undocking the spacecraft. This means that the decision to undock has been made and no one can change their minds and close the hatches again. We are committed to undock. The second set of 6 latches is opening now. These latches attach the Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station. Once that second set of latches are open, they are all open. So that means that we're going to move quickly into our next steps. The undocking burns, they're quick. They're 1 second and 5 seconds long. We just approached the 4-minute mark since the undock command has been sent. We expect this to be about a 5-minute process. About 30 seconds to go before the second set of latches is complete to move into the open position.
Station Houston on 2. All hooks open.
Copy, all hooks open. Timer started.
Dragon separation confirmed.
Copy confirmed.
So we have confirmation that the spacecraft is undocked. The Dragon spacecraft supporting SpaceX's 30th commercial resupply mission undocked from the International Space Station at 12:10 p.m. Central as the space station was flying over North Bangkok,
Dragon
Thailand.
departure burn 0 complete.
In this short amount of time, we've already moved, the Dragon spacecraft has already moved through 3 burns. It completed that, the undock, the series of 2 undock burns, resulting in a physical separation of the spacecraft at 12:10 p.m. Central Time, and has already completed the first of its undock burn, the first of its departure burns. The International Space Station is in an orbital nighttime, so our views of Dragon are quite in the dark, but NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson does confirm that she saw the undocking as well and confirmed. The second departure burn will bring the spacecraft through the station's keep-out sphere. That is a first safety boundary around the International Space Station. This burn is slightly longer than the first burn, lasting around 21 seconds. We're just about 2 minutes away from the second departure burn of the Dragon spacecraft that will help it move through the keep out sphere. It's that safety boundary, the one of two that we have aboard the International Space Station. The spacecraft successfully undocked at 12:10 p.m. Central Time as the space station was flying over North Bangkok, Thailand. Almost immediately after the second set of hooks was open, it completed 2 undocking burns. These were short, just about a second and a half, and then the second lasting 5 seconds. Those both performed nominally. It also went on to complete a 16-second departure burn. It's a first in the series of 2. Just about one minute remaining until the second departure burn takes place, bringing the spacecraft through the station's keep-out sphere, the first safety boundary around the International Space Station. This burn is slightly longer than the first departure burn, lasting around 21 seconds. Less than 30 seconds to go, and the Dragon spacecraft is about 100 meters away from the space station. The first departure burn, departure burn 1, this is the second in a series of 2 departure burns, is now underway.
Station Houston on 2, departure burn 1 complete.
Sweet.
And just like that, the burn is complete, and it was a nominal burn. You may have heard the Capcom referring to it as departure burn 1. It's a bit of an interesting nomenclature here. We have departure burn 0 and we have departure burn 1. So when you hear the Capcom relay that it is departure burn 1 has been completed, that means the second in a series of departure burns are complete. The next major milestone for the Dragon spacecraft is to move out of the keep-out sphere. We're about a minute away from that next milestone.
Station Houston on 2, Dragon has exited the keep-out sphere.
Great news.
Dragon has exited the keep-out sphere. The next milestone flight controllers are looking out for is the approach ellipsoid exit.
Stay firm.
Sweet.
the approach ellipsoid, this is the farther of the two safety boundaries surrounding the International Space Station. The spacecraft is expected to fly outside of this marker in a little over 10 minutes from now. The spacecraft has the unique capability of returning cargo from the International Space Station back to Earth. It's carrying about 4,100 pounds of scientific data and hardware back to Earth. The spacecraft is continuing to maneuver itself away from the space station. It's approaching 270 meters away from the International Space Station right now. You're watching live coverage of a SpaceX Cargo Dragon spacecraft departing the International Space Station. It delivered cargo to the folks living aboard the International Space Station. It stayed docked for just over 1 month and undocked from its port just minutes ago at 12:10 p.m. Central Time, 1:10 p.m. Eastern. Like we just talked about, it's carrying 4,100 pounds of scientific experiments and hardware, and it's returning them back to Earth. It's going to splash down on April 30th, just after midnight Central Time, about 1 a.m. Eastern Time. Right now, the International Space Station is in an orbital nighttime, so we don't have great views of the Dragon spacecraft, but flight controllers have data between what they have and Mission Control Hawthorne as well. And we also have NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson keeping an eye on the operation as well. So this spacecraft has the unique capability of returning cargo to the International Space Station back to Earth. While some scientific experiments are 100% conducted in the microgravity environment, sometimes it's beneficial to be able to get data returned to Earth. For example, our NASA astronauts are sometimes the test subjects themselves as we learn about how microgravity affects the body. Researchers can collect samples before and after their space flights, but with the help of the Dragon cargo vehicle, samples can be taken during their mission and sent back to Earth. Other cargo spacecraft burn up in Earth's atmosphere, never returning to Earth's surface. This is another beneficial capability as well because it helps eliminate waste and other unwanted items aboard the space station, and they act as a much-needed trash service for the space station. And there we go. We finally got the spacecraft of the hour. That is the Dragon cargo spacecraft on your screen there. It's about 500 meters away from the space station at this point, continuing to move farther and farther away. The next major milestone that we're tracking is departure of the approach ellipsoid. It had departed the Keep Out sphere earlier and is on its way out of the Approach ellipsoid. These are the two invisible boundary markers of the International Space Station, marking its neighborhood. So it is a cargo spacecraft after all, so let's talk a little bit about some of the science experiments as we get these great views of the Dragon vehicle. One experiment inside the Cargo Dragon spacecraft is called GEARS. It's the genomic enumeration of antibiotic resistance in space. So as the name suggests, it surveys the space station for antibiotic-resistant organisms, allowing researchers more insight into how bacteria adapt to the space environment. Another investigation on board is called Missy 18. This investigation includes many experiments that study materials and how they're affected by the space environment. One experiment looks at high visibility materials. The goal is to see if the materials could be used on spaceflight hardware to satisfy lighting requirements. A couple Missy experiments looked at materials that could be used in future Artemis missions to the moon, including material for the Lunar Gateway. The materials returning home were exposed to the space environment for 6 months and are now making their way back to Earth. So we've already talked about some experiments that can benefit those living in the microgravity environment on long-duration missions. Of course, we want to keep our astronauts healthy. We're also looking ahead to future Artemis missions to the moon, so we want to be doing experiments using the International Space Station as a test bed for those. But some scientific experiments aboard the space station also benefit life here on Earth. So one experiment from the European Space Agency is bringing home samples from immune cell activation. That's the name of the experiment. In this experiment, immune cells were modified with nanovectors that are intended to carry therapeutic agents that specifically to their target cells. Results could help develop new therapies targeting central nervous system diseases and skin cancers, such as melanoma. The Dragon spacecraft is now more than 750 meters away from the space station. You can kind of see it as that white dot right at the center of your screen, drifting away from the space station. This is the 4th flight of this cargo spacecraft. It had previously supported SpaceX's 27th commercial resupply services mission. The spacecraft is now approaching 950 meters away from the International Space Station, and we've got some good views of the spacecraft on your screen. There's about a minute remaining until it reaches its next milestone, which is exiting the approach ellipsoid. It's exiting the neighborhood of the International Space Station. Dragon now over 1,000 meters away from the International Space Station. The spacecraft has exited the approach ellipsoid.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2. Dragon is outside the approach ellipsoid on a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. One delta we have is since physical SEP was 5 minutes delayed. The cupola constraint for shutters will end at 1855, and the lab window constraint will end at 1900.
Houston copies on 2. Just to clarify, we don't touch the lab wharf shutter, correct?
That is affirmative.
Okay, just want to be sure what the constraint meant to us.
Copy. We also just wanted to say thank you so much for the hard work you've put in over the past 37 days. From all the unpacking and science and getting this thing buttoned up to send back home, there have been quite a few long days, and Houston, Hawthorne, and the science teams around the world are very appreciative of that. Congratulations on the completion of this incredible mission.
I'm first to the mic, but it was a pleasure, an honor, and a little bit frenetic, but that's part of a lot of the science that makes spaceflight wonderful. So it was really great to see all the great science, and especially actually to talk to the guiders and the payload developers, and some of the investigators, to share some of that excitement with them. It was great being in their hands up here, and we really appreciated the opportunity. Go Dragon!
Houston copies all, and go Dragon.
All right, so the Dragon spacecraft has moved outside of the approach ellipsoid, and the crew aboard the International Space Station has heard the news and agreed and shared their happy words. To conclude what we've been doing, we kicked off today looking at the weather, And with a go from the weather after watching it all weekend, we also received a go from Mission Control Hawthorne and Mission Control Houston here in the International Space Station's Flight Control Room to proceed for an undocking. The undock command was sent, the umbilicals were retracted, bringing the spacecraft to internal battery power. Then 2 sets of hooks were released. The first set opened nominally, committing us to the operation of undocking. The second set of hooks opened up as well, allowing the spacecraft to not be attached to the International Space Station anymore. And in rapid succession, we saw the undock. The first of the 2 undock burns lasting just over a second, the second undock burn lasting about 5 seconds, both proceeding nominally. Then the spacecraft moved to its departure burns. It completed 2 successfully. And after that second undock burn, undocked from the International Space Station at 12:10 Central Time, 1:10 Eastern, as the International Space Station was flying over North Bangkok, Thailand. The undocking of this spacecraft kicks off a series of planned events for the International Space Station. Looking ahead, astronauts will get into their Crew Dragon spacecraft, undock, and dock again in a different parking spot. This is called a port relocation, and it allows us to make way for 2 more NASA astronauts, Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore, supporting NASA's Boeing Crew Flight Test mission, scheduled to launch on May 6th. The port relocation takes place Thursday, May 2nd, and has the crew moving the Crew Dragon from the Harmony forward port to the Harmony Zenith port, where this cargo spacecraft that we just watched today just departed from. The Dragon spacecraft, we're getting our final views here on the screen, and it's just that white dot center, and just slightly below, it is now approaching 1,900 meters away from the International Space Station. It has moved outside of the keep out sphere and outside of the approach ellipsoid, these 2 major milestones that we're looking at, and joint coverage between the International Space Station's Flight Control Room and Mission Control Hawthorne has concluded. So now the SpaceX team has their eyes on the spacecraft and is going to continue watching it through its other milestones. It's got a couple of more burns coming up, leading to an eventual splashdown on April 30th, around midnight Central Time or 1 a.m. Eastern, off the coast of Florida. That concludes our coverage today. Thank you so much for watching. This is Mission Control Houston.